I want to talk also about some of the more exploitative practices with regards to workers in the global south. You use one really galling example actually in Kenya. Can you talk about some of the research around that, some of the people you met?
Yeah, so I ended up interviewing workers in Kenya who were contracted by OpenAI to build a content moderation filter for the company. And at that point in the company's history, it was starting to think about commercialization after coming from its nonprofit fundamental AI research roots. And they realized if we're going to put a text generation model in the hands of millions of users, it is going to be a PR crisis if it starts spewing racist, toxic, hateful speech. In fact, in 2016, Microsoft infamously did exactly this. They developed a chatbot named Tay. They put it online without any content moderation. And then within hours, it started saying awful things. And then they had to take it offline. And to this day, as evidenced by me bringing it up, it's still brought up as a horrible case study in corporate mismanagement. And so OpenAI thought, we don't want to do that. We're going to create a filter that wraps around our models so that even if the models start generating this stuff, it never reaches the user because the filter then blocks it. In order to build that filter, what the Kenyan workers had to do was wade through reams of the worst text on the internet, as well as AI generated text on the internet, where OpenAI was prompting its models to imagine the worst text on the internet. And the workers then had to go through all of this and put into a detailed taxonomy. Is this hate speech? Is this harassment? Is this violent content? Is this sexual content? And the degree of hate speech, of violence, of sexual content. So they were asking workers to say, does it involve sexual abuse? Does it involve sexual abuse of children? So on and so forth. And to this day, I believe if you look at OpenAI's content moderation filter documentation, it actually lists all of those categories. And this is one of the things that it offers to clients of their models, business clients of their models, that you can toggle on and off each of these filters. So that's why they had to put this into that taxonomy. The workers ended up suffering very many of the same symptoms of content moderators of the social media era. Absolutely traumatized by the work, completely changed their personalities, left them with PTSD. And I highlight the story of this man, Mo Fadokinye, who was one of the workers that I interviewed, who showed to me that it's not just individuals that break down, it's their families and communities, because there are people who rely on these individuals. And so Mofat was on the sexual content team. His personality totally changed as he was reading child sexual abuse every day. And when he came home, he stopped playing with his stepdaughter. He stopped being intimate with his wife. And he also couldn't explain to them why he was changing, because he didn't know how to say to them, I read sex content all day. That doesn't sound like a real job. That sounds like a very shameful job. ChatGPT hadn't come out yet, so there was no conception of what does that even mean. And so one day, his wife asks him for fish for dinner. He goes out, buys 3 fish, one for him, one for her, one for the stepdaughter. And by the time he comes home, all of their bags are packed and they're completely gone. And she texts him, I don't know the man you've become anymore. And I'm never coming back.
You say that's the case with regards to text. Are people also having to engage with images as well? I mean, that was more of a social media thing. Is that the case
Yeah.
here too?
Yeah. There were workers that they then, so after this, they contracted these Kenyan workers. That contract actually was canceled because there was a bunch of scrutiny on that company and the third party company that they were contracting the workers through, and huge scandal.
It's a
So
Sama, right?
Sama, yeah,
Sama, right.
and there was a huge scandal around Sama, and then OpenAI ended up shifting to other contractors who were then involved in moderating images.
And were they remunerated for the kind of work they were doing quite well, or?
For the Kenyan workers, they were paid a few dollars an hour.
Right.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of the Atlantic, you talk about people in South America doing effectively, Mechanical Turk piecework for these companies as well. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So generative AI is not the only thing that leads to data annotation. This has actually been part of the AI industry for a very long time. And so I ended up years ago interviewing this woman in Colombia who was a Venezuelan refugee about the specific thing that happened to her country in the global AI supply chain. So when in 2016, when the AI industry first started actually looking into the development of self-driving cars, there was a surge in demand for highly educated workers to do data annotation labeling for helping self-driving cars navigate the road. You have to show self-driving cars, this is a car, this is a tree, this is a bike, this is a pedestrian, this is how you avoid all of them. These are the lane markings, this is what the lane markings mean, and they're humans that do that. And it just so happened in 2016, when this demand was rising, that Venezuela as a country was dealing with the worst peacetime economic crisis in 50 years. So the economy bottomed out. A huge population of highly educated workers with great access to internet suddenly were desperate to work at any price. And these became the three conditions that I call the crisis playbook in my book that companies started using to then scout out more workers that were extremely cheap for working for the AI industry. And so the woman that I met in Colombia, she was not just it. She was working in a level of exploitation that was not based on the content that she was looking at. She was labeling self-driving cars and labeling, retail platforms and things like that. The exploitation was structural to her job in that she was logging into a platform every day and looking at a queue that automatically populated with tasks that were being sent to her from Global North companies. And most of the time, the tasks didn't appear. And when they did, she had to compete with other workers to claim the task first in order to do it at all. And because there were so many Venezuelans in crisis and so many of them were finding out about data annotation platforms, in the end, there were more and more and more workers competing for smaller and smaller volumes of tasks. And so these tasks would come online and then disappear within seconds. And so one day she was out on a walk when a task appeared in her queue, and she sprinted to her apartment to try and claim the task before it went away. But by the time she got back, it was too late. And after that, she was like, I never went on a walk during the weekday again. And on the weekends, which she discovered is less likely for companies to post tasks, she would only allow herself a 30-minute walk break because she was too afraid of that happening again.
And did she detail about how that gave her sort of anxiety or insomnia or mental health kind of overheads?
And
that sounds insane. Sounds like an insane way to live.
It completely controlled her life. She didn't tell me about whether or not it gave her insomnia, but it completely controlled the rhythms of her life in that she had this plugin that she downloaded that would sound an alarm every time a task appeared so that she could, cook or clean or whatever and without literally just looking at the laptop the whole day. And she would turn it on to max volume in the middle of the night because sometimes tasks would arrive in the middle of the night. And if the alarm rang, she would wake up, sprint to her computer, claim the task, and then start tasking at like 3 a.m. in the morning. And she had chronic illness. One of the reasons why she was tethered to her apartment doing this online work in the first place was not just because she was a refugee, but also because she had severe diabetes. And it got to the point where she ended up in the hospital and was completely blind for a period of time. And the doctor said that if you had not come to the hospital when you did, you would have died. And so she was tethered to her home because she had to inject herself with insulin like 5 times a day. And it was this really complicated regime that didn't allow her to commute to a regular office, have a regular job. So she was doing all of this extremely disruptive, dysregulating work on top of just trying to manage extreme severe diabetes.
I mean, it's extraordinary you've managed to unveil those stories. I mean, that's why the book is so interesting, fascinating for me. That's why it's got the plaudits it's got, is that you're speaking to people who are on first-name terms with Sam Altman, then you're talking to Venezuelan refugees in Colombia. And it's really important to say that this work is being done for multi-trillion-dollar companies.
Yes.
That's the other side of it, right? You're saying Elon Musk worth $300 billion plus, and then there are people, that's where the value is being generated.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when the reason why I really wanted to highlight those stories is because that's where you really see the logic of empire. There's no moral justification for why those workers whose contribution is critical to the functioning of these technologies and critical to the popularity of products like ChatGPT are paid pennies when the people working within the companies can easily get $1 million compensation packages. The only justification is an ideological one, which is that there are some people born into this world superior and others who are inferior, and the superior people have a right to subjugate the inferior ones.